damn pretty. I admit, take though. I can't deny her though. They my bestie. She's my bestie. That's my bestie. Your pair of eyes had me paralyzed. Toxic nigga, but you made me to a better guy. Smoke, but with you on forever, ever. I can watch you all day, girl, like you're televised. You think like this nigga, they ain't never lied. I left the bitches alone, I had to pick a side. Look in your eyes, girl, you were hypnotized. Of course, it was your breasts, hips, and them damn thighs. Close my eyes, I'm still mesmerized. To get mad at my bestie, I tried. That's my bestie, my pretty.
I heard she's the one, she's got it going on. That's my pretty eyes, baby. Yeah, yeah. She don't take no mess. My bestie is the best. That's my pretty eyes, baby. Yeah, yeah. I heard she's the one, she's got it going on. That's my pretty eyes, baby.
Hey, what's up, everybody? So I figured I would get on my court stuff again. So, anywho, because I am trying to get monetized till my for my birthday. It is at the end of the year, and I have to come up with 2,000 more watch hours. So, anywho, and I love court stuff. So I figured we would go over the civil suit that karenread has filed against everybody in the case. The only ones that are lacking is the MSP and the CPD, which is Canton Police. That's because they have to meet certain criteria in order for them to sue a government entity like that. So anyways, I figured we'd go over the thing. If you don't know who karenread is, she was accused of running over her boyfriend 22 miles an hour in a quote snowstorm, but enough to attract a cat at the time that he was found. But anyways, or the time that they say that he met his demise. Anywho, she went through 2 prosecutions, was finally acquitted. She was acquitted the first time, but they didn't want to take it, so they redid the trial and she was acquitted. So she's suing everybody, as she should, because she has lost her house, her home, her livelihood. She was a finance officer and also a professor. So she lost all that because of this. Because, once you get accused of something, your job's not going to stand by you. They're just not. And who knows if she'll ever be able to get that job back or be able to do the career that she's been doing for 25 years of her life. Anywho, so this Friday, she does have a court hearing. The family of John Okeefe, that is her Boston cop boyfriend that was found dead in the snow in front of another Boston cop's home. And there's some stuff going on. But this lays out the case perfectly. Like her attorneys and everything, they laid it out just right. So anyways, I figured we'd go through it. Sorry, I'm not a professional read out louder, so bear with me, okay? Please bear with me. But anyways, please hit the like, share the live. If you can, at the end of this video, hype me up. I would greatly appreciate it. I'm trying to make it. Let me make it. Anyways, all right, let's get started. Okay. So, I don't know how to do this. Oh, okay. Anyways, this says Commonwealth of Massachusetts Superior Civil Action, and then the date that it was filed, which was November 17th, 2025. And it's whoa, hey, settle down. Okay, anyways. It is Karen Read plaintiff versus Michael Proctor in his personal capacity, because he's no longer a detective. He lost his job because of this case. Sergeant Yuri Buchanan, in his personal capacity, because he also facilitated the cover-up. Lieutenant Brian Tully in his personal capacity, because he was also involved in this cover-up. Let's see. Brian Albert, Nicole Albert, Jennifer McCabe, Matthew McCabe, and Brian Higgins. They are all that were in the house that day, that facilitated, that conjured up, that she ran him over with the car, that, just wait. We're getting here, okay? So come down. Whoops. Can you stop doing that? Okay, so introduction, the complaint. Oh my gosh, why is this doing that? Okay. For 3.5 years, plaintiff Karen Read was wrongfully accused of homicide and subjected to suspicion, arrest, 2 prosecutions, and a public condemnation. Or I don't know, whatever. All resulting from the gross misconduct of Massachusetts State Police and those working in tandem with MSP to shield from liability the party or parties responsible for the death of Boston police officer John Okeefe III. Now, after being acquitted of all charges relating to Mr. O'Keefe's death, Miss Read, don't do this. Oh my gosh, you're going to irritate me. Just a little bit. Go up a little bit. Okay. The third, after being acquitted of all charges related to Mr. O'Keefe's death, Miss Read brings this action to recover for and address the actions of those. Oh, where's the footnotes at? I don't even see the footnotes. Okay, well, there's 2 footnotes here. But anyways, so we'll finish that one. Okay. 1, the Massachusetts State Police in the town of Canton will be added as defendants after presentment is made pursuant to whatever government, blah, blah, blah. Anyways, and footnote 2, it is plaintiff intends to move to consolidate this action with the related action estate of John Okeefe and Read, civil action related for the discovery trial efficiencies. Okay. Whoa. Now we go to page 2. Hello. Okay. So, hold on. Oh, you're really gonna irritate me. Okay, so it says Miss Read brings the action to recover for and address the actions of those. Come on. It's just not gonna go. For those actually involved in Mr. O'Keefe's death, and the law enforcement officers who objectively failed to ensure the justice was sought and served in the aftermath of January 29, 2022. Karen Read did not kill her then boyfriend, Mr. Okeefe. Rather, in the early mornings of January 29th, Mr. Okeefe was killed in defendant Brian and Nicole Albert's home at 34 Fairview Road in Canton house in an altercation during a late night house party with other defendants, collectively the house defendants, after a night of heavy drinking. Whoa. go up just a little bit. Just a little bit. Why are you being so messed up? After a night of heavy drinking, the House defendants responsible for Mr. Okeefe's death, some of who had professional experience with police investigations, I'm lost now. Some of who had professional experience with police investigations concocted a plan, and immediately after the altercation, to avoid culpability and to frame Karenread. Then all first responders for help, and had all first responders for help. Among others, the House defendants concocted a Google search for information about how long to die in the cold, moved Mr. Okeefe's body outside, and placed him on the Albert's front lawn near the road to make it look like Mr. Okeefe was hit by a vehicle and that he died in the snow without ever coming into the house that night. Mr. Okeefe's body remained on the Albert's lawn until Karenread found him later in the morning. 3. From the beginning, investigators from the MSP allowed the House defendants to direct the investigation away from themselves and towards Miss Reed. The House defendants were well connected and close social group with strong ties to law enforcement. The Alberts are a prominent family in Canton, and the investigating police officers knew them well. The lead investigator for MSP, Michael Proctor, grew up in Canton and resides there to this day. He has been and remains close personal friends with the Albert family. House defendant Brian Albert was a longtime Boston Department officer, and House defendant Brian Higgins was an agent with the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. Whoa. 4. Adhering to the unwritten protecting their own, Proctor and his MSP colleagues intentionally disregarded the obvious and compelling evidence tying the House defendants to Mr. Okeefe's murder. Specifically, Mr. Okeefe's injuries were consistent with a physical altercation. He had bruises and lacerations on his face and a deep gash to the back of the head, suggesting that he was punched and fell backwards, hitting his head on a ridged surface. He also had dog bite wounds and scratches on his right arm and forearm. Equally evident, Mr. Okeefe did not have a single injury consistent with being struck by a vehicle. He did not have any broken bones or even a bruise on his legs, feet, arms, shoulders, torso, back, ribs, or anywhere below his neck that a medical examiner would otherwise expect to find on a person who was struck and killed by an impact from a 3-ton vehicle. And to erase any doubt, the Commonwealth's own medical examiner, the pathologist who conducted the autopsy for the Commonwealth, concluded that Mr. Okeefe's body showed no signs of a vehicular strike. Okay, let me look and see if anybody's over here. Hey, DJ. Hey, Hood. Best of the collector. What is this? It's the Karenread civil trial. Anyways, hope everybody's having a good day. I'm just reading the document. So, yeah. Okay, let's see. Now we'll go to number 5. Number 5, despite that Proctor and others shielded the House defendants by intentionally sidestepping fundamental investigatory procedures propelled by the House defendants' false just a little bit. False statements, including that Mr. Okeefe never went in the house. Proctor reported in text messages just hours in the investigation that the House defendants weren't going to get any shit for this because he's, Brian Albert, a Boston cop. And that Proctor was determined to make the investigation cut and dry by bringing charges against the girl. Indeed, Proctor made his intentions clear. In writing, Karen Read had zero chance of skating. She's fucked. This pronouncement was a mere 16 hours after Mr. Okeefe's body was discovered on the Albert's lawn, and Proctor had not even walked into the house. Nor did the Canton police. Anyhow, but okay. Now we're on 6. True to his promise, Proctor and his colleagues did not search the house for blood evidence resulting from the gash of the back of Mr. Okeefe's head, or for fingerprints, or for DNA evidence. This is really hard to read. Hey, no, get back up there. Come on. No. Just a little bit. I don't know why this can't be easy. Okay, DNA evidence. Proctor did not search the house despite the fact that Mr. Okeefe was discovered without a winter coat, without the hat that several witnesses said he had been wearing that night, and without his left shoe. As at Proctor's direction, the house was never processed by a criminalist or even photographed. No member of the MSP, including Proctor, set foot inside 34 Fairview for nearly a week. The police did not examine or take evidence from the Alberts German Shepherd that was in the house on January 29th. A dog had a history of attacking other dogs and people. 7. Can we go down a little bit? No. Neither Proctor nor any of the MSP troopers conducted physical examinations of the house defendants for evidence of involvement in an altercation, such as marks on their hands, knuckles, or face, or bruises on their body. They did not seize or search the house defendants' phones. They conducted only perfunctory, unrecorded conversations with Proctor's friends and acquaintances without attempt to corroborate their stories. Come on, just a little bit. Where are we at? They permitted would-be witnesses to communicate with each other and coordinate their stories before any formal interviews. They allowed critical evidence to be manipulated in some instances and outright destroyed in others. In short, by focusing the investigation solely on Miss Read as implicitly directed by the House defendants through the misrepresentations they made to police, Proctor and his colleagues disregarded failed to obtain pertinent interviews and other critical evidence of the House defendants that cannot now be recovered or recreated. Okay, let me check again. Hey, Ronan, how are you? How are you, Freaky C? All right, I'm back over here. Sorry, I'm not paying attention. I'm reading. Okay. Proctor also secretly communicated with the Alberts on his phone, deliberately back channeling those communications to circumvent his state issued device, and used his sister as a conduit. For instance, on multiple occasions, Proctor disclosed critical and confidential information about the investigation to his sister, who passed the information to her close friend, Julie Albert, Brian Albert's sister-in-law. Julie Albert then passed that same information on to the rest of the family and the House defendants. Part of these communications included Julie Albert's promise to buy Proctor a thank you gift for handling the investigation in a manner that intentionally avoided implicating the House defendants and singularly focused on Miss Reed. 9. No, we're on 9. Proctor then went so far as to manufacture evidence to ensure that Miss Reed, not his friends and fellow law enforcement officers, was blamed for Mr. Okeefe's death. This included planting evidence at the scene on Mr. Okeefe's clothes and on Miss Reed's vehicle to support the false narrative that Miss Reed hit Mr. Okeefe with her car, even knew Mr. Okeefe's injuries were inconsistent with a motor vehicle strike and consistent with a physical altercation. Far from and dog attack. No, go to 10. I need 10. Come on. Okay. No. Oh my gosh. I hate this right now. Oh my gosh. Okay, 10. Far from conducting an objective investigation with integrity, Proctor personally sexualized and dehumanized Miss Reed throughout the investigation, specifically Proctor's private communications to his high school buddies, sister, and MSP colleagues that he believed would never be discovered. Expose the corruption and bias at the core of MSP's entire investigation. Specifically, only hours into the investigation, in a text chain with 8 of his high school buddies, Proctor stated that Miss Reed is a whack job cunt, retarded, a nutbag, and a babe with no ass. Proctor further ridiculed and derided Miss Reed for her serious medical conditions, stating that her balloon not leak poo in other private text messages to his MSP supervisors and colleagues. Proctor bragged about that while conducting a search of Miss Reed's phone, he was looking for naked pictures of Miss Reed. Disappointed, he reported that there were no nudes so far. In an unfiltered utterance, Proctor revealed his true mindset. Hopefully, she offs herself. You can't say on that on YouTube, but there it is. Okay. Now 11. And I'll like, gosh, hey. 11. Okay. Indeed, Proctor's supervisor and the MSP knew about the condoned Proctor's unlawful conduct, and in some instances expressively encouraged this flagrant abuse of power. For example, on one occasion, Proctor's immediate supervisor, Yuri Buchanan, responded with a thumbs up emoji to a text calling Miss Reed retarded. Proctor's supervisor and the MSP knew Proctor had a close relationship with the Alberts and that he made no secret of his bias against Miss Reed. demonstrating a close prejudice against her from outset. No. Okay. Relying on manufactured evidence, actively ignoring exculpatory evidence, and without investigating obvious signs pointing towards the House defendants, the Commonwealth secured 2 separate arrest warrants for Miss Reed and knowingly baseless indictment against her, and then wrongfully persecuted her for murder twice, as alleged below. Then an unlawful acts, not only utterly plaintiff's meritless wrongful death claim against Miss Reed, but they also form the foundation for Miss Reed's claim against the defendants. These acts violated no. Hey, Chick. Let me finish 12 before I go on. These acts violated Miss Reed's state and federal constitutional rights, the Massachusetts Civil Rights Act, and well-established Massachusetts tort principles, blah, blah, blah. Okay, let me look. What a wild news story. Yeah, this case is wild. It's got corruption all over it. What the kind of hell descriptions are those? It sounds like 10-year-old used the term poo. Yeah, right. He was very immature, and they don't care. They don't fucking care. Now they will care because they're going to have to pay. They're going to have to pay. Okay, 13. On June 18, 2025, after a 2-month trial, a jury rejected the Commonwealth's theory in part because the overwhelming physical, scientific, and medical evidence established that Miss Reed's vehicle did not strike Mr. Okeefe, and that Mr. Okeefe's injuries did not come from a vehicle strike. Although Miss Reed was ultimately and finally acquitted of all charges related to Mr. Okeefe's death, Proctor was fired, and nearly every MSP officer in Proctor's chain of command was disciplined for their egregious abuses and misdeeds. The Commonwealth still has not sought or provided justice, not to the Okeefe family, not to the community at large, and certainly not Miss Reed. In response, the Commonwealth has offered only empty platitudes instead of solutions. The head of MSP, Colonel Jeffrey Noble, stated, "The events of the last 3 years have challenged our department to thoroughly review our actions and take concrete steps to deliver advanced investigative training, ensure appropriate oversight, and enhance accountability. Under my direction as colonel, the state police has and will continue to improve in these regards." In an interview with the Boston Herald, Noble acknowledged that the systemic nature of MSP's conduct in Reed's case. Okay. I'm eyes wide open to a cultural issue that I have concerns with as it relates to Trooper Proctor. These hollow words do nothing to right the devastating wrongs that have been visited on Miss Reed. Colonel Noble's words confess a sickness deep in the marrow of the MSP, but offer no remedy, no medicine, no relief to someone so brutally victimized by it. 15. On Wednesday, March 19, 2025, following the public disclosure of Proctor's illegal and unethical conduct related to the Reed investigation, the MSP's trial board found Michael Proctor guilty of a Class A violation, which included that he was biased in his dealings with a homicide suspect and or brought otherwise himself and the Massachusetts State Police into disrepute, whatever. That can be 16. Miss Reed's life was not merely turned upside down by the MSPs and the House defendants' misconduct. It was forever changed by the defendants' transgressions and wrongdoing. The years of uncertainty and unimaginable emotional distress has left lasting scars that will never heal. At the same time, neither Mr. Okeefe nor his family has received justice. His killer or killers still walk free. By asserting her claims against MSP Proctor, his supervisors, the town accountant, and the House defendants, Miss Reed seeks at minimum to confront and redress these wrongs and others. Most importantly, she seeks to force the Commonwealth to fulfill its duty to stop law enforcement from trampling the innocent and protecting their own. Okay. So, let me go back over here. Hey, Stu. Anyways, hopefully there is justice, but they don't want it. They don't want the justice. I mean, this has been going on for 3.5 years, almost 4. It'll be 4 in January. So, yeah, I don't blame her. I don't blame her. Her whole world is upside down because of this case. Okay. So 2, the parties. Let's go to the footnote. There's a footnote, and it says, as stated above, MSP will be added as a new party by amendment once the applicable presentment period expires. Okay, come on. Okay, so 17. Plaintiff Karen Read is an individual residing in North Dayton, Massachusetts. 18. Defendant Michael Proctor is a former Massachusetts state trooper residing in Canton, Massachusetts. He is being sued in his personal capacity. 19. Defendant Sergeant Yuri Buchanan is a Massachusetts state police trooper residing in Stoughton, Massachusetts. He is being sued in his personal capacity. Defendant Brian Tully is a Massachusetts state police trooper residing in Hingham, Massachusetts. He is being sued in his personal capacity. Defendant Brian Albert is an individual residing in Norwood, Massachusetts. Defendant Nicole Albert is an individual residing in Norwood, Massachusetts. Defendant Jennifer McCabe is an individual residing in Canton, Massachusetts. Defendant Matthew McCabe is an individual residing in Canton, Massachusetts. Defendant Brian Higgins is an individual residing in Sandwich, Massachusetts. Anybody got a sandwich? Oh. Anybody want a sandwich? Okay. Jurisdiction and venue. The court has jurisdiction over all claims in the case pursuant to and with the regard to the federal claims pursuant to and versus police 37-4 Mass 47-5-484 1978. Okay. Venue is appropriate in the court pursuant to MGL because at least one party to this case, plaintiff Karen Read, resides in Bristol County. Whoa, don't go there. Okay. 4. Facts common to all counts. Mr. Okeefe's death. Well, no. Just a little bit. Okay. Mr. Okeefe's death. Before his death, Mr. Okeefe and Miss Read were dating. On the evening of January 28, 2022, Mr. Okeefe and Miss Read went out for the night. They first went to C.F. McCartney's in Canton, where they had several drinks. They then went to the Waterfowl Bar in Canton. There they met up with a group of acquaintances, including Brian Albert, his wife Nicole Albert, Brian's brother Chris Albert, and his wife Julie Albert, Jennifer McCabe, Nicole's sister and Brian's sister-in-law, her husband Matthew McCabe, and Brian Higgins. The group of acquaintances had several drinks and planned to continue the party back at the Alberts' home in Canton at 34 Fairview Road. House defendant Jennifer McCabe told John Okeefe that he should come to the house. The group had overlapping social relationships at the time. Brian Albert was a Boston police officer, as was Mr. Okeefe, though they did not know each other well. Brian Albert and Brian Higgins were close friends. Higgins was an officer with the ATF. He also was permitted to keep an office in Canton Police Department, CPD, alongside Brian Albert's brother, Canton Police Detective Kevin Albert. Kevin Albert had his professional and social relationship with Michael Proctor. So now you see how it's all intertwined and how they conjured up this conspiracy is because they all know each other. Karen and John were outsiders. And you know, some people were jealous of their relationship. That's going to be disclosed here shortly. But Brian and Nicole Albert's son, Brian Albert Jr., and his friends were already at the house for Brian Jr.'s birthday. In addition, Colin Albert, Brian Albert's nephew, was present as they tried to hide him from the case. That they didn't even investigate or didn't even interview him until, I don't know, until like a year and a half later or something like that. It's just really weird. Okay, 33. Miss Read and Mr. Okeefe had been to the house before, had never been to the house before January 29th, 2022. They arrived in front of the Alberts' home at 12:20. Miss Read was reluctant to attend the party for several reasons, including that she was unsure whether they were at the correct address and whether they were ever welcome to the late night party. Mr. Okeefe got out. Oh my gosh. Stop doing that. Can you just be nice, please? Okay. Location and whether they were ever welcome to the late night party. Mr. Okeefe got out of Miss Read's SUV and indicated that he would check out the party and report back to her. Mr. Okeefe walked towards the front door, garage door area of the house, entered one of the two doors. A period of time passed without any word from Mr. Okeefe. Miss Read, who was still hesitant to join, presumed that Mr. Okeefe's intended to stay, and therefore she left to go home without him. Oh, Lord, anyways, okay. And this is where they conjured up, yeah, give me a sandwich. And this is where hey, Sean, I don't know why you don't have a freaking wrench anymore. I'll have to give you one. So yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy stuff, man. But anyways, okay, let's keep going. So at some point after entering the house garage, Mr. Okeefe was involved in a physical altercation either inside the house or garage. During the altercation, the Albert's German Shepherd attacked him, and Mr. Okeefe sustained multiple dog bites and scratches on his right arm. He also suffered an incapacitating contricu wound on the back of his head. Mr. O'Keefe's head wound was the cause of him striking the back of his head on a head wound was caused by falling backward and striking a ridged surface. The Albert's garage contains such surfaces. By contrast, the head wound could not have been caused by a vehicle strike or falling backward on a flat, cold lawn like the Alberts. Because of their knowledge of the criminal investigations, the Alberts and the McCabe's and Higgins house defendants knew that calling for medical care to help save Mr. O'Keefe's life would trigger immediate and irreversible risk of their own criminal exposure. Therefore, at least the five of them agreed on a simple plan to exonerate themselves and implicate Miss Reed. They would tell anyone who inquired Mr. Okeefe never entered the house and hide evidence that he was ever there, including his body. 36. Sometime during the night, they repositioned a Ford Edge vehicle at a spot adjacent to the front lawn, which obscured the view of the area of the lawn from potential passerby. At some point further in the night, they carried or dragged Mr. O'Keefe's body to the same area in the yard, close to where one or more of them later claimed Miss Reed dropped him off. Mr. Okeefe earlier that night. The plan was devised to make it appear that Mr. Okeefe had been struck by Miss Reed's vehicle and then died as a result of exposure to the cold. Mr. Okeefe was either dead when the house defendants left him on the Albert's lawn, or he died thereafter. After the physical altercation, Higgins left the house and drove to Canton Police Department in the middle of the night. He later told investigators he had to do some administrative work, but then changed his story subsequently, stating that he drove to the station because he had to move cars in the parking lot due to the snowstorm. However, video from inside the station shows Brian Higgins walking down the hallway and surreptitiously entering offices while wearing a hoodie to obscure his face. Surveillance video outside reveals Higgins transporting a large bag from one vehicle to another in the driveway. Oh, yeah, cool. Let me see if anybody's saying anything. Jeez, that's brutal. The brain damage and instant impact. Yeah. And the result is what, being punched, and he fell back. He was drunk, you get, your equilibrium is off when you're drinking. So if you got a big punch and you fall backwards, hit your head, bam, there goes, you're dead. You're dead either within minutes or hours, just simply because you lose a lot of blood and then your brain swells. Yeah. Anyways, I watched enough of the trial. I watched it twice. So, because I watched both trials. So this case is pretty wild. Hey, bro. Anyways, okay, back to where I was. Okay, after leaving the police station, Higgins and Brian Albert continued to coordinate their stories by calling each other multiple times in the morning hours. Oh, in the early morning, not the evening, the early morning hours, and ultimately spoke with each other on their cell phones at 2:22 a.m. Later, both Brian Albert and Higgins denied the existence of these phone calls. And then, when confronted with their existence by a separate law enforcement agency, FBI, a non-MSP or non-CPD law enforcement agency at a separate proceeding, they coordinated the same exact lie, falsely claiming that multiple calls and answers were just butt dials. However, 5 minutes after Higgins' Albert call, Miss McCabe performed a Google search on her phone. How's long to die in the cold, misspelling the first word. Miss Reed searches for Mr. Okeefe. Miss Reed began to search for Mr. Okeefe on January 29th, just before 5 a.m. When she woke up and realized he wasn't home, she phoned house defendant Jennifer McCabe. McCabe, who already knew exactly what happened to Mr. Okeefe, Miss McCabe insisted that Miss Reed drive to Miss McCabe's house rather than driving to 34 Fairview, which Reed did. Then the two of them were joined by Carrie Roberts, and the three of them left the McCabe residence. However, rather than go to 34 Fairview, oddly, Miss McCabe directed them to go back to Mr. Okeefe's home, where Miss Reed had just come from. After the three of them finally drove to 34 Fairview, the illogical McCabe directed route to 34 Fairview was intentional. It allowed the house defendants more time to finish creating the scene and hiding evidence before Mr. Okeefe's body was discovered on the Albert's lawn and first responders arrived. Okay, nobody's typing good. Don't do that to me. Okay. As they approached the house, Miss Roberts driving, Miss Reed saw Mr. Okeefe almost immediately. She screamed for Miss Roberts to stop the vehicle and jumped from the car to run over to Mr. Okeefe. She began rendering aid, including CPR. As the house defendants planned, Mr. Okeefe's body was discovered in front of the Albert's house near a flagpole and fire hydrant on the left side of the Albert's property, as seen from the roadside. The Ford Edge, which had been parked in a position to obscure Mr. Okeefe's body in the middle of the night, had been moved. While Miss Roberts joined Miss Reed with administering CPR, Miss McCabe did not help to even approach Mr. Okeefe. Rather, she sat in the cab of the vehicle, called 911, and reported that there's a man passed out on the snow. Despite knowing that her brother-in-law, Brian Albert, a police officer and first responder, was just feet away inside the house, Miss McCabe never went in the house or requested that Albert come down to help Mr. Okeefe. Rather, as Mr. Okeefe laying dying in the snow, Miss McCabe stood and watched with no fear, urgency, or even concern for her family members residing mere feet away. Like I would be searching the house, man. I mean, I would. Like, I don't understand. If it was anybody else's house other than a police officer or a public official or whatever, they would have been searching our houses. And that this case just it's mind-blowing. And they've been doing this to people for a long time. Like, yeah, Proctor, he was gonna appeal his firing. But when they found all his Google Cloud or whatever cloud messages, they showed racist texts and other things about defendants. So yeah, they decided not to keep on going with the case. But investigation begins. The CPD were the first on the scene shortly after 6 a.m. At that time, there was no evidence that Mr. Okeefe had been hit by a vehicle. In fact, the evidence suggested just the opposite. His body did not show signs of trauma commonly associated with being struck by a car. There were no bone fragments or trauma to his lower body, his torso, or any other part of his body as investigators would expect from a vehicle strike. Rather, Mr. Okeefe's injuries were consistent with being physically assaulted to the face and head and attacked by a dog. For good reason, the ranking CPD officer on the scene, Sergeant Michael Lang, opined on a telephone call captured on the dash cam that Mr. Okeefe looked like he had been in a fight. Moreover, the initial search conducted by Canton police officers revealed that there was no vehicle debris on the lawn at 34 Fairview, let alone any debris at or near Mr. Okeefe's body. Not a single piece of taillight material was found on the lawn that morning or on the roadway, notwithstanding multiple searches and the use of a leaf blower to remove snow. Tellingly, despite the commotion outside, including more than a dozen first responders, 3 police cruisers, 2 ambulances, a ladder fire engine, all with their emergency lights flashing, and at least 2 civilian vehicles, plus Miss Reed screaming upon finding Mr. Okeefe's body, no one from the Alberts house, including police officer Brian Albert, ever went outside to see what was happening, let alone help. They wanted to avoid scrutiny from police investigators. Sergeant Lank was a longtime friend of the Alberts and first law enforcement officer to enter the house. He spoke to the Alberts and the McCabe's pursuant to their plan. The Alberts and McCabe's told Sergeant Lank that Mr. Okeefe had never went into the Alberts' home that night before. The Alberts and McCabe's statements were false. Mr. Okeefe arrived at and entered the house or garage where he was assaulted, attacked by Albert's dog, and suffered a fatal injury to the back of his head. Despite Mr. Okeefe's injuries being wholly inconsistent with the story the House defendants were now telling them, neither Sergeant Lank or any other member of CPD searched the house to determine whether the occupants or anyone else were involved in Mr. Okeefe's death. Nor did they request the search of the occupants' cell phones, observe their bodies for evidence of a fight, or even secure the scene where Mr. Okeefe's body was found. They failed to do so because of bias born of friendship and loyalty in favor of the Alberts and McCabe's. Okay, let's see if anybody's chatting. Hey, Rice, how are ya? How are ya, awesomeness? I'm just reading this this civil suit about police corruption, you know. Doing my thing. But yeah, anywho, this case is wild. I need a cigarette though. Can I turn my camera off? There we go. Okay, let me go outside. This may interrupt the whole thing, but that was weird. Okay. Anywho. And it's just getting good. I hope everybody's having a good day and stuff. And I'm going to take a break just for a sec so I can do this cigarette really quick. And then I'll start reading again. If you can, please hit the like, share the live, all that good stuff. I greatly appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah, this case is wild, Rice. Like, I don't know. I love to see police get called out on their bullshit. You know what I mean? I love it when they get sued, as they should. They ruined this woman's life. For 3 years, they ruined her fucking life. And now they forever ruined her life because I don't think she'll ever be a finance manager or a professor again because of the charges that she was dealt with, which is bullshit, you know? Just give me a moment. Uno momento, por favor. Okay. Now I'm back to reading. Okay. They failed to do so. Okay. After Sergeant Lank returned to the CPD 3 hours after the discovery of Mr. Okeefe's body and more than 2 hours after being interviewed at the Albert's home that morning, Miss McCabe called Sergeant Lank to report that she recalled additional information as part of the plan to implicate Miss Reed and more suspicion from the and remove suspicion from the House defendants. She falsely told Sergeant Lank that Miss Reed told her twice that morning, I hit him, I didn't hit him. I hope I didn't hit him. There we go. That's what it was. More than a year later, at a separate proceeding, Miss McCabe changed her story on this topic yet again. In furtherance of the House defendant's plan, Miss McCabe then falsely reported that Miss Reed outright confessed to hitting Mr. Okeefe right after she found him in the snow. Proctor leads MSP investigation despite conflicts. Oops. Michael Proctor was assigned as a case officer and had primary responsibility for the MSP investigation of Mr. Okeefe's death. Sergeant Yuri Buchanan was Proctor's direct supervisor. Lieutenant Brian Tully was the supervisory officer at Norfolk County State Police Detective Unit, and thus supervised both Buchanan and Proctor. In their roles, Buchanan and Tully both knew at the times exactly the extent of Proctor's misconduct in investigating Mr. Okeefe's death, as described below. From the beginning, Proctor should never have been assigned as an investigating officer, let alone the lead investigator. He grew up and resides in Canton, is a good friend of the Alberts, and had known the family for years. Proctor and Julie Albert, Brian Albert's sister-in-law, had each other's personal cell phone numbers. In fact, just days before Mr. Okeefe's death, Proctor communicated with Julie Albert about babysitting Proctor's minor child. Proctor's sister, Courtney, was also a close friend of Julie. In fact, Proctor's own mother referred to the Alberts as the Proctor's second family. The existence of these relationships was intentionally suppressed by Proctor and other members of the MSP, including Buchanan and Tully, in an effort to ensure the House defendants were protected and the Miss Reed's right to a fair investigation and trial were undermined. Proctor, Buchanan, and Tully engaged in a corrupt and biased investigation by not investigating inside the house and interviewing house defendants as friends rather than suspects. Proctor, Buchanan, Tully, and the MSP never searched for DNA evidence inside the house, never looked for ridge surfaces that could have caused the gash on the back of Mr. Okeefe's head, never inspected the house defendants' bodies for indication of bruises or cuts that resulted from an altercation, and did not search the house defendants' cell phones. This allowed potential evidence to be destroyed, disposed of, removed, or simply become unrecoverable. Proctor's, Buchanan's, Tully's interviews of the house defendants were outside of the normal protocol. They were interviewed either at the home, their family member's home, the lawyer's home. In the case of Brian Higgins, there's lawyer's office. Their lawyer's office in the case of Brian Juber Jr., not Juber, Brian Jr. and Caitlin Albert, their place of employment or over the phone. These interviews were each untimely, unrecorded, and fundamentally designed to protect the house defendants, and the house defendants took full advantage of it. Specifically, Jennifer McCabe became the point person for the house defendants in providing their false narrative to investigators. She managed and communicated details about the house defendants' messaging and the investigation itself, including visiting proctors and other investigators' private residence, mapping out timelines to coordinate statements with other witnesses, leading group text message chains that were later partially deleted, and planning private meetings at all hours of day and night. Indeed, these were never the acts of innocent witnesses seeking to help in an investigation concerning the death of an alleged friend. Rather, they were predicate acts of conspiracy among a group of people with a shared goal of deflecting their criminal exposure onto someone else. The remaining group of texts that were not deleted or that were recovered later reveal some of their planning. For instance, on the evening of January 29th, Jennifer McCabe texted her sister, Nicole Albert, that Carrie Roberts, who was present when Mr. Okeefe's body was found, talked to the cops, and kept it simple. Of course, there would be no reason to report back to the other house defendants about Roberts keeping it simple unless what really happened was more complicated. Proctor, Buchanan, and the MSP never sought these communications. Rather, they were obtained by Karen Read's defense attorney's repeated motions to compel access to data on Miss McCabe's iPhone. Kind of taking a break from it. Reading is fundamental, and I don't fundamentally read well, but hey, it's whatever. It's whatever. Okay, back to this. Later in group texts with Jen McCabe and Brian Albert and Nicole Albert, Matthew McCabe suggested having Chris Albert publicize their crafted story to a reporter, saying, ask Chris to ask some questions. Tell them the guy never went in the house. As an endorsement of the plan, Brian Albert responded, exactly. And this ain't really like laying it all out there. I mean, they could really lay it all out there. but they're waiting for trial. You know what I mean? Like, this is just the rundown. This is the rundown, but it's very detailed. But there's even more details that they're like leaving out. Like the DNA on the clothes. Why didn't they test more than Proctor's and what's his name, Buchanan's DNA? Why didn't they test anybody in the house's DNA? Because John was found with five different male DNAs on his shoe, 3 different male DNAs on his shirt, and like 2 or 3 on his pants, on the stains. And they still could test those, you know. But I don't think that the Norfolk County DA is going to do that, because he is also complicit in all this shit. So, and sadly, they can't go after him because they have immunity. And I think that's bullshit. I think that's utter bullshit. Anyways, importantly, the text messages from the House defendants' phones that were ultimately recovered and that provide a window into the conspiracy and misconduct, as well as MSP's unlawful investigation, were not the product of CPD or MSP's investigative work. Rather, based on media reports raising serious questions about MSP's investigation and the House defendants' role in Mr. Okeefe's death, another separate law enforcement agency began its own subsequent investigation. That investigation, and not MSP's, resulted in obtaining the House defendants' phones, taking statements from House defendants, and conducting a separate proceeding, after of which MSP refused to do itself. Indeed, the evidence procured by the separate law enforcement, I'm just going to say FBI, investigation demonstrates the House defendants' conspiracy and unlawful conduct, as well as the MSP's bias and corruption. Proctor and Buchanan initially interviewed the McCabe's and Brian Albert on January 29th at the McCabe's home at 12 Country Lane in Canton, at which time they agreed, again falsely stated, that Mr. Okeefe never entered the Albert's home. Buchanan and Proctor did not interview Nicole and Brian Higgins until February 3rd, 2022, and did not interview Chris and Julie Albert until February 10th, nearly 2 weeks after Mr. Okeefe's death and more than a week after Miss Reed was arrested and charged. Before both interviews, the McCabe's and Alberts continued to coordinate their stories, as evidenced in group texts. Proctor, Buchanan, and Tully likewise failed to conduct a meaningful investigation into Higgins' involvement. When Proctor and Buchanan interviewed Higgins on February 3rd, Higgins presented the troopers with a select set of self-curated texts between himself and Miss Reed. They learned that Higgins and Miss Reed had been exchanging flirtatious texts. Oh, you stupid thing. Had exchanged flirtatious texts, and that Higgins reported at least one instance in which Miss Reed and Higgins had kissed while at Mr. Okeefe's home, mere weeks before his death. Rather than pursuing Higgins as a possible suspect, Proctor, Buchanan, and Tully neglected to investigate the matter further. They never interviewed Higgins again, even after surveillance video revealed that Higgins was suspiciously hiding his face in the halls and parking lot of the CPD at 1:30 on January 29th. The video contradicts Higgins' statements about his actions that night. However, not only did Proctor, Buchanan, Tully, and MSP not investigate what Higgins was doing or what was in the bag, but they went as far as to hide this video from Karen Read and her defense. and her criminal defense attorneys for years. Reed's defense did not receive the videos until after Reed stood trial for the first time, and even after the separate law enforcement agency's investigation revealed that late the night phone calls between Brian Albert and Brian Higgins, MSP failed to pursue either a witness further or seek a full forensic extraction of Higgins' phone or even simple call log from a cellular provider. When it was revealed that Mrs. Reed, when it was revealed that Miss Reed's defense team requested the reading is fundamental. Preservation of Brian Albert's and Higgins' phones in order to forensically image them. This request was allowed by the court. Both men got rid of their phones within days of one another. Higgins went as far as to drive to a military base on Cape Cod, remove the SIM card from his phone, cut the SIM card with scissors he brought with him, and destroyed and disposed of the phone and card separately in 2 dumpsters, and then drove back home. Their destruction of their phones eliminated potentially incriminating communications between them and was a direct result of Proctor's, Buchanan's, and Tully's refusal to collect important investigative evidence that would be exculpatory to Miss Reed. Even after learning about the destruction of both witnesses' phone, MSP investigators had other avenues they could have used to pursue evidence, such as cellular toll records, or merely interviewing Brian Higgins and Brian Albert to inquire about the nature of the late night conversations. They intentionally ignored these avenues as well. Not only did Proctor fail to probe his friends' stories, he coordinated with them through his sister. Proctor spoke to Courtney multiple times a day and knew she was in close contact with and providing information to Julie Albert. Julie and Courtney called each other many times between February 1st and 2nd, and at least 67 times between February 1st and September 6, 2022. For example, as he prepared to question Chris Albert and Julie Albert on February 10th, Proctor told his sister, Courtney, that the interview was not a big deal. Courtney told Proctor that Julie Albert had been nervous and wanted to give him a thank you gift after the interview. To avoid scrutiny, Proctor instructed Courtney to tell Julie to give the gift to his wife, Elizabeth Proctor. So now you even have bribes going on in this case, which is crazy. Oh, shit. Hey, don't do that. Okay. Proctor shared investigatory details with Courtney before they were public. In the same instance referenced above, when his sister informed him that Julie Albert had been so nervous before the interview, and instead of investigating further, he shrugged it off, laughed, and asked why. But Proctor knew exactly why Julie Albert was nervous. He sought to reassure her by telling Courtney that it was fine, just a quick convo. And then after the interview, Proctor spoke to Julie on his personal cell phone in an unreported conversation. Proctor never treated the Alberts as witnesses in a murder investigation. He treated them like family friends that they were. Okay, let me see. Let me take a break for a minute. No, I've been on this forever. Okay, nobody's typing? Anyways, if you could please hit the like, share the live, all that good stuff. I'm trying to get monetized by my birthday, which is the end of the year. It would be a great birthday gift. And a Christmas gift and a New Year's present, all wrapped in one, you know. You're listening. I'm not a great reader, but thank you for listening, Rice. I appreciate it. Reading is fundamental. Fundamental. I can't say it. Anyways, I've never been able to read out loud. It's always been a thing. Anyways, okay. At one point, leading up to some of the interviews, Miss McCabe asked Nicole Albert if she had heard anything more than the investigation, more about the investigation, confident she would learn more. From Julie Albert, again through Courtney. Nicole Albert responded, "We'll get more info tomorrow. Don't want to text about it." House defendants did not want to text about their activities and communications because they tried to hide and or lie about them. For instance, it was discovered in the second criminal trial that Miss McCabe had lied in her sworn testimony in the first trial about not visiting 34 Fairview with Carrie Roberts on January 30th on their way to Michael Lank's house, Sergeant Lank. Anyways, however, while they did not text about this meeting, McCabe's cell phone location data obtained later by Reed's defense reveals that she did in fact visit 34 Fairview just a day after Okeefe's death and lied about it. The McCabe's, Alberts, and Higgins all told the same false story to investigators in their interviews, and Proctor, Buchanan, and Tully accepted their coordinated statements without making efforts to corroborate their stories. Rather than investigate their friends and brethren, Proctor, Buchanan, and Tully and MSP target Karen Read. Whoops. Okay. Instead of taking the routine, objective, and necessary steps of investigating the McCabe's, Higgins, and Alberts, Proctor, Buchanan, and Tully focused extensively on Miss Read as a suspect from the start of the investigation, despite substantial evidence exonerating her and implicating others, just as the House defendants intended. Proctor seized Miss Reed's cell phone and her SUV within 30 minutes of interviewing her on January 29th. He arrested her 72 hours later before reviewing any surveillance from the bars or ring camera footage, before interviewing exculpatory witnesses, and before the medical examiner's official conclusion that the manner of death could not be determined, and that there were no injuries to Mr. Okeefe's body consistent with a vehicle strike. Much to Proctor's surprise, through a separate law enforcement agency's investigation, his contemporaneous text messages were discovered. Among them, Proctor texted with his high school buddies on evening of January 29th, the day he began the investigation. He told them that the MSP had already determined the Alberts were not going to receive any scrutiny about Mr. Okeefe's death, even though the MSP had not at the point visited the crime scene or been inside the Alberts' home, and had performed only a cursory interview of the McCabe's and Brian Albert. Proctor told his friends that Mr. Okeefe had been hit by a car and had not been in hit by a car and not been in a fight, despite the fact that Mr. Okeefe has suffered no injuries consistent with a vehicle strike. But he did have injuries consistent with a fight and a dog attack. Proctor rejected a friend's belief that Brian Albert, the homeowner of the property where Mr. Okeefe's body was found, would receive some shit, instead agreeing with another friend's assumption that you guys, the MSP, are out to make it cut and dry since it involves cops. Proctor revealed that he had already decided he was going to put serious charges on Miss Reed and that she was fucked and that there was zero chance she skates from the outset. Proctor was determined to pin it on the girl. Oh, I'm only halfway through this sucker. Anyways. Proctor's supervisors were aware of his bias and conflicted relationships in this investigation. They didn't have to guess. Proctor told them. He told them he knew that Albert's text messages from Proctor to Buchanan and other MSP troopers show Proctor had decided to focus suspicion on Miss Reed to the exclusion of everyone else. He told the troopers that Miss Reed was retarded and that he was searching her phone for nudes of her. In the text chain, Sergeant Buchanan liked Proctor's text describing Miss Reed as retarded. Buchanan received Proctor's texts and never reprimanded Proctor or addressed his improper bias and conduct. So basically, he was complicit in the whole plan. Because he was determined to put serious charges on Miss Reed, Proctor ignored the fact the Commonwealth's medical examiner could not conclude that Mr. Okeefe's death was a homicide, determining instead that the manner of death could not be determined. The medical examiner also refused to conclude that Mr. Okeefe's death died as a result of being struck by a vehicle and later testified at trial that his injuries were not consistent with the car strike. Proctor later admitted that in his entire career, he had never seen a homicide investigation where the medical examiner could not determine the manner of death, but he remained undeterred in the quest to charge Miss Reed. As he later admitted, the medical examiner's refusal to rule the death a homicide did not matter because either way, Miss Reed was going to be charged. Proctor and Buchanan plant certain evidence and make false statements in court and other legal documents to frame Miss Reed. Proctor made the investigation cut and dry by manufacturing a case against Miss Reed. A crucial first step was to ensure that the crime scene and evidence was not secured. This was a violation of MSP policy and well-established best practices for critical incident investigations. Specifically, the MSP crime laboratory requires proper processing of evidence at major crime scenes, including crime scene photography and evidence processing and recovery of latent footprints, footwear, and tire track evidence. Neither the MSP troopers involved in the investigation nor the CPD police officers on the scene secured the Alberts home or the area where Mr. Okeefe's body was found. The MSP did not take any photos of the house, including any part of the yard where Okeefe's body was found, until February 1st, more than 3 full days later. No photographs were ever taken of the inside of the garage at 34 Fairview. The intentional departure from established protocols permitted Proctor and Buchanan to generate false incriminating evidence against Miss Reed and give the House defendants time to destroy the actual evidence. By approximately 2:30 p.m. on January 29th, before he had even met or interviewed Miss Reed or seen her Lexus SUV, Proctor had already ordered seizure of the vehicle at her parents' home in Dayton. By 4:17 p.m., the vehicle was in MSP's possession. The vehicle was then towed to the CPD Sallyport, even though the MSP has at least 2 closer barracks and Massachusetts was in the middle of an historic nor'easter. Proctor knew he had more leeway to manipulate evidence regarding the SUV at CPD than at MSP's facility, and he knew he needed to have the evidence in close proximity to the crime scene at 34 Fairview. Before the vehicle arrived at the garage, Miss Reed's Lexus taillight had a minor crack but was intact. The crack occurred when Miss Reed backed into Mr. Okeefe's car at 5 a.m. that morning when she was leaving to search for him. That incident was captured on video. Buchanan and Proctor followed the vehicle from Dighton and arrived to CPD about 5:35, just moments after the tow truck with the Lexus. At some point after the vehicle arrived at the Sallyport, the right rear taillight was almost entirely destroyed. Video taken from different angles in the Sallyport show Buchanan, Proctor, Canton Police Chief Ken Berkowitz, and others near the taillight, but notably, no video captures the taillight's appearance. At the precise time it arrived at the Sallyport, the available surveillance video from the Sallyport, as well as the CPD access card swipe log obtained by a separate law enforcement agency, reveals seemingly unfettered access to the Sallyport by a myriad of individuals throughout the evening of January 29th, including just before and just after 5:30 p.m. One or more of them destroyed the taillight, secretly took pieces of it into their own possession, and then planted some of them in various places at 34 Fairview and Mr. Okeefe's close. No. Knowing that there were video cameras both inside and outside the Sallyport, Proctor and Buchanan worked together to obscure their role in manipulating the right rear taillight. And then ultimately to present false evidence at the first criminal trial. Specifically, Proctor directed Buchanan to secure video footage from the surveillance cameras located both inside and outside the Sallyport, which he did. These videos were manipulated in two significant ways. First, a critical 42-minute portion was deleted from the video from the Sallyport front wall camera, and the portion from 5:08 p.m. to 5:50 p.m., which included the exact time Miss Reed's Lexus arrived in the garage. This footage would have shown that the tail light was intact. Second, from the Sallyport back wall camera was inverted, which made the right side of Miss Reed's vehicle appear to be the left side and vice versa. Another camera, main driveway side exterior, captured the back end of the Lexus as it arrived at CPD, but was too grainy to decipher the condition of the passenger taillight. In other words, they manipulated all the videos. The videos from inside and outside the Sallyport, the Proctor's request for Buchanan to obtain was intentionally hidden from Karenread and her defense attorneys for more than 2 years to avoid scrutiny. The video was then sprung on them immediately before and during the first trial. One driveway camera's footage was not revealed to the defense until just prior to the start of the second trial. In fact, Buchanan presented one part of the video during the direct testimony until questioning by the assistant district attorney Adam Lally. Buchanan narrated the video to the jury, correctly identifying that Proctor was never near the rear of the vehicle, but claimed that he never approached the right rear taillight area of the vehicle. That testimony, however, was entirely false, as he well knew the video that Buchanan authenticated as fair and accurate was actually neither fair nor accurate because it had been inverted. Proctor was actually behind the right taillight for a significant period. But because it was inverted, it appeared in the video that he was behind the left taillight. They hoped this would allow Buchanan to lie about the issue at trial without detention. With this video, Buchanan's false testimony, the MSP, Proctor, and Buchanan attempted to mislead the jury in order to conceal the tampering with and planning of taillight material. Proctor and Buchanan also took taillight pieces from the Sally Port, brought them back to 34 Fairview to plant them in the location where Mr. Okeefe's body was found, and then falsified various documents in an attempt to hide their conduct. In warrant applications to the Stoughton District Court and Norfolk Superior Court for searches of Google's electronic records, ring videos, Miss Reed's phone, Miss Reed's vehicle, cell tower, and other sources of information, Proctor swore he seized Miss Reed's vehicle at her parents' home at 5:30 p.m. on January 29, 2022, and had the vehicle towed to CPD. Report shared by the Dayton Police Department in 2023 revealed that the Lexus was towed from Dayton at 4:17 p.m. Proctor's assertion that he seized it at 5:30 p.m. was intentionally false to hide the fact that the car was in police custody for 73 minutes longer than indicated in his sworn affidavit. Proctor maintained the false narrative because it would hide the exact time frame when he had opportunity to remove pieces of the taillight from Miss Reed's vehicle and bring them back to the house so that they could later claim the pieces had been there since approximately 12:30 a.m. on January 29th. However, unbeknownst to them, driveway video from the Reed residence in Dayton and a report written by the Dayton Police report revealed Proctor's lie and revealed the true and accurate time the Lexus SUV came into MSP's possession. And no pictures were taken at that time, which is crazy. Oh, no. Okay. Proctor also deposited the SUV taillight pieces that he and others removed from the vehicle in the Sally Port on Mr. Okeefe's clothes. Proctor retrieved Mr. Okeefe's clothes from the floor of the hospital where he was pronounced deceased. Instead of securing the clothes in a sealed container or bag, as protocol requires, Proctor and Buchanan drove them around in his car all day and then placed them in Norfolk County District Attorney's Office for at least 6 days, where they were accessible to Proctor, Buchanan, and other MSP troopers. Proctor and Buchanan failed to create a log to document the chain of custody of the clothing. Therefore, and by design, there is no record of when, how many times, and under what circumstances Proctor and Buchanan touched, manipulated, handled, or otherwise tampered with the clothing. The MSP evidence submission handbook dictates the chain of custody begins at the time of the collection and that the collector sealed evidence packages as soon as possible after collection to ensure integrity of evidence items and limit loss of transient evidence. Here, in violation of MSP's stated policies, the chain of custody for all of John Okeefe's clothing, as well as dozens of pieces of tellite material, does not begin until March 14th, nearly 2 months after it was collected, when Proctor finally submitted it to the MSP crime lab. Okay, hold on. I'm coming inside. Uno momento, por favor. Let me plug you in. Okay. Let me go back to StreamYard. Okay. Running is fundamental. Funning is damn it, don't get me started. Anyways. Okay. Let's see. Where was I? Proctor and Buchanan placed pieces of the SUV taillight on them where they were then identified by the crime lab. By the crime lab in 2023, a whole year later. Proctor also planted, let me make sure. Did I put myself back on camera? I did. Okay. Let me come over here a little bit. Okay. Proctor also planted pieces of glass on the bumper of Miss Reed's SUV while it was in possession at the CPD Sallyport, which he then claimed that to have recovered later on February 1st. Proctor planted this evidence to make it look like these were shards or originated from a cocktail glass that Mr. Okeefe was holding when he exited the waterfall bar. Oh my gosh, what did I do? Waterfall bar. Oh. Evidently, Proctor did not plan on Karen Read's defense attorneys insisting on forensically testing on the glass shards, which showed that they did not match the cocktail glass in Mr. Okeefe's possession. In fact, the 5 pieces of glass, 5 pieces originated from multiple different sources. One shard of glass on the bumper did not match another piece of glass that had been in Proctor's possession during the investigation. The only way for the glass to have ended up on the SUV bumper is that Proctor planted it there in an attempt to connect the vehicle to the death of Mr. Okeefe. Other aspects of conflicted and corrupt investigation. Whoops, get back there. Proctor's, Buchanan's, and MSP's investigation was rife with other examples of corruption and bias. For example, despite evidence that Brian Albert may have had video surveillance at the house, neither Proctor nor Buchanan nor any other member of the MSP issued subpoenas for Ring or any other home surveillance company, and no one questioned any other member of the Albert family about the presence of video monitoring. Proctor and the MSP also failed to track down other important witnesses and evidence. For example, Brian Lofgren, town of Canton snowplow operator, turned out to be one of the most significant witnesses in the entire criminal trial. Proctor and his colleagues never spoke to him during their investigation and only did once Lofgren was interviewed by a separate law enforcement agency. The FBI provided statements inconsistent with MSP's narrative 18 months after Miss Reed was already indicted and awaiting trial. Specifically, Mr. Lofgren, specifically Lucky, drove his snowplow by the house multiple times in the early morning hours on January 29th, including at 2:30 and 3:30 a.m. He reported that there was nobody on the lawn at 34 Fairview nor cars on the street in front of the house at 2:30. Mr. Lofgren believes he would have seen a body had it been there on the lawn where Mr. Okeefe's body was found several hours later. Instead, the second time he drove by the house at 3:30, Mr. Lofgren saw a Ford Edge in the front of the Alberts home and had not been there an hour before, but which was part where Mr. Okeefe's body later was found. Brian Albert drove a Ford Edge at the time. However, the Ford Edge was gone by the time Miss Reed arrived at the house around 6 a.m., and in its place, she discovered Mr. Okeefe's body. Proctor, Buchanan, and Tully never made any effort during the actual investigation to track down Mr. Lofgren or any information relating to the Ford Edge. Proctor also secretly made efforts to protect other Albert family members during the investigation who may have had a role in Mr. Okeefe's death. Witness Julie Nagel told Proctor that Colin Albert, Brian Albert's nephew, had been present at the house the night of January 28th, 29th, but Proctor omitted his name from the official summary of Miss Nagel's interview, even though he listed all of the others who had been present at the house with Colin. When Miss Reed's attorney filed a motion to obtain Proctor's notes, his handwritten memorialization of Julie Nagel interview mirrored almost exactly what was typed up in his police report, except for the words Colin Albert. Proctor's interactions with Kevin Albert, Brian Albert's brother, during the investigation also demonstrate his close relationship with the Albert family, as well as his propensity for violating MSP rules and Massachusetts criminal laws. Repeatedly, Proctor used his personal cell phone to speak with Kevin, a CPD officer, instead of official channels when he coordinated interviews of witnesses, even though CPD was recused from the investigation. Further in the middle of Proctor's investigation in the summer of 2022, it was discovered that Proctor and Kevin Albert were out together drinking alcohol and driving in Proctor's cruiser on Cape Cod. At the end of the night, Kevin Albert forgot to bring home his gun and badge and left them in Proctor's cruiser. They're drinking and driving in Proctor's MSP vehicle, violating both MSP policies as well as various Massachusetts criminal statutes, and further highlights the conflicted nature of MSP's investigation. Moreover, because of their close relationship, Proctor, Buchanan, and Tully worked together with CPD in hiding certain videos from Karen Read's criminal defense team. Specifically, upon information and belief, MPD and CPD, they should have been at MSP, but anyways, collaborated to keep exculpatory surveillance video. That's a lot of big words in one little sentence. Collaborated to keep exculpatory surveillance video from Karen Read's criminal defense team in preparation for the first trial. Those videos captured Brian Higgins' activities in CPD's parking lot and inside the police station shortly after the physical altercation at the house that led to Mr. Okeefe's death. David demonstrated that Higgins' statements about his post-house party activities on the night of Mr. Okeefe's death. were not accurate. Upon information and belief, CPD knew it had this evidence and worked with MSP to keep it from Miss Reed. Additionally, upon information and belief, CPD set its auto delete function for saving certain surveillance videos from the Sally port to 30 days, therefore assuring the immediate destruction of likely additional exculpatory evidence. The 30-day auto delete setting conflicts with the fact that CPD videos were shared with the defense over the course of 3 years. Therefore, either the setting was changed to prevent a defense expert from auditing the footage, which is when the 30-day setting was discovered, or footage was obtained within 30 days of January 29th and withheld from the defense. The indictments, trials, and aftermath. Miss Reed was arrested on February 1st, 2022, pursuant of criminal complaint charging her with manslaughter, among other charges. She was required to post $50,000 bail. And the court imposed several other conditions to release, including loss of her driver's license and stay-away orders from the Okeefe family and John Okeefe III's home. Miss Reed was later rearrested on June 9, 2022, after being indicted for second-degree murder, manslaughter, and leaving the scene of an accident resulting in death. Her bail was set at $100,000 by the Norfolk Superior Court. In February of 2023, her bail was reduced to $80,000 at the defense's request. Miss Reed was tried twice by the Commonwealth. The first trial started in April 2024 and ended July 1st after the court ordered a mistrial because of a hung jury. On June 18, 2025, following another nearly 2-month trial, Miss Reed was acquitted of all charges associated with the death of Mr. Okeefe: murder, manslaughter, and leaving the scene of an accident resulting in death. For the first time in 3.5 years, Karen Read was able to leave court knowing that the forces aligned against her had failed to convince a jury to buy their deception. Beginning in January 2022, the defendant's actions have had profound effect on Miss Reed. She lost her employment and income. She lost her professorship. She lost her private health insurance. She lost her car and her driver's license. She lost her house. Her reputation, both personally and professionally, was utterly destroyed. She incurred multiple millions of dollars in debt for legal fees, and additionally millions in expert fees and costs. In addition, after being arrested twice, jailed, and tried twice, she suffered years of intense stress and emotional harm, worried that she would be imprisoned for the rest of her natural life for a crime she did not commit. Okay, let's see what's going on. What are we laughing at that? Okay. Please hit the like, share the live. Thank you. I'm trying to be monetized by my birthday. Anyways, Miss Reed suffers from both Crohn's disease and multiple sclerosis. As documented under seal with the criminal court, Miss Reed has undergone tens of surgeries to manage her illnesses prior to January 29, 2022, and endured a blood infusion just months before Mr. Okeefe's death. In the aftermath of the charges, 2 arrests, and during both trials, Miss Reed suffered a well-documented exacerbation of her symptoms amid the stress, anxiety, and emotional and physical impacts of being wrongfully accused of murder. While fighting for her freedom against corruption, Miss Reed underwent dozens upon dozens of documented medical procedures and treatments to attempt to address her health issues. The defendants concocted a plan, executed that plan, and framed an innocent woman, and they are now responsible for these exculpatory extraordinary damages Miss Reed has suffered at their hands. MSP investigates and punishes Proctor, Buchanan, and Tully in their misconduct during the investigation. Whoops. Proctor wrote more than 1/3 of the police reports in this case, testified at the state grand jury 3 separate times, interviewed every member of the Albert and McCabe families, had possession at least until March 14, 2022, of all of John Okeefe's clothing and all the tully pieces found broken from the housing processed Mr. Okeefe's Chevrolet Traverse the day after Miss Reed's was arraigned. Had access to and reviewed all ring videos, had access to and reviewed the surveillance video from C.F. McCarthy's, had possession of all CPD, Sallyport, and driveway videos, and numerous other critical investigative activities. And yet, once evidence of Proctor's conflicts and lies became public, he was extracted from this case in an effort to hide him from the jury and sanitize the compromised investigation, while Miss Reed was forced to trial not once but twice. Ultimately, Michael Proctor was relieved from duty and transferred out of the detective unit of Norfolk County District Attorney's Office on July 7th, 2024. Mere days after conclusion of Miss Reed's trial, Proctor was terminated from the MSP on March 19th. 2025. Upon a release from the district attorney of more implicating text messages from Proctor's phone on October 18th, 2025, Proctor officially ended his appeal with the Civil Service Commission. On September 23rd, 2024, and I went too far, the MSP Internal Affairs investigation found Yuri Buchanan failed to perform his supervisory duties in an ongoing investigation. On July 7th, Buchanan was transferred out of the Norfolk District Attorney's Office Detective Unit and reassigned to an administrative role in another division. He should have lost his job too. On October 18, 2024, Brian Tully was disciplined and reassigned from SPDU and stripped of his detective designation. Tully was given special dispensation by Norfolk County District Attorney Michael Morrissey to continue detective work on the Reed case despite his demotion because of his behavior on this case. Upon information and belief, MSP troopers David DeChico and Jeffrey Katrowski were also disciplined for their misconduct associated with MSP's investigation of Miss Reed. 5 counts. Oh, there's a footnote. I'll read the footnote after. Okay, malicious prosecution under the 4th Amendment against Proctor, Buchanan, and Tully. The preceding paragraphs are incorporated herein by reference. Proctor, Buchanan, and Tully violated Miss Reed's 4th Amendment rights by engaging in malicious prosecution of Miss Reed by causing her to be seized pursuant to legal process unsupported by probable cause. The criminal proceedings against Miss Reed terminated in her favor when she was acquitted of murder, manslaughter, and leaving the scene of an accident with the death. After making presentment pursuant, Miss Reed will add counts against MSP for negligent training, supervision, and retention of MSP troopers, including Proctor, Buchanan, and Tully, and the town of Canton for negligent oversight of the investigation into Mr. Okeefe's death and of its own officers and faculties. Proctor, Buchanan, and Tully caused Miss Reed to be seized without probable cause, as described above, including but not limited to by leading, handling, and participating in the Okeefe's investigation, even though Proctor was conflicted due to personal relationships with various witnesses, suspects, and potential suspects, with conflict led to Miss Reed's unlawful treatment. Handling the investigation, even though Proctor had an extreme and personal negative bias towards Karen Read, which led to Miss Reed's unlawful treatment, violating MSP rules, policies, and procedures in all aspects of the investigation, planting, fabricating, and manipulating evidence, falsifying documents, preparing false affidavits, and committing perjury, failing to secure evidence and crime scene, obtain evidence, timely and appropriately interview suspects, and investigate the Alberts, McCabe's, or Higgins, and allowing them to destroy potentially exculpatory evidence, failing to consider and present exculpatory evidence to prosecutors and the grand jury investigating Mr. Okeefe's death, such as evident dog by injuries on Mr. Okeefe's arm and evidence that his injuries were caused by an altercation and not a vehicle strike, such as the lack of lower body trauma. Following her indictment by a grand jury, Miss Reed was rearrested without probable cause, forced to pay a $100,000 bond to be released from custody, and required to comply with numerous pretrial release provisions. Though these post-arraignment deprivations of her liberty constitute seizures under the Fourth Amendment. Those deprivations continued during Miss Reed's second trial, in part because of Mr. Proctor's false testimony at Miss Reed's first trial, among other things. Proctor falsely testified that when he saw the tail light of Miss Reed's car at Miss Reed's parents' house in Dighton, it had large pieces missing, and the shattered tail light displayed at the first trial, as photographed on February 1st, 2022, was in the same condition as on January 29th. He and Buchanan never touched any part of Miss Reed's vehicle when it was stored at the CPD Sallyport. He retrieved taillight pieces on subsequent searches at the Alberts home when he knew he had deposited or arranged for someone to deposit taillight pieces at the property. Chris and Julie Albert were his loose acquaintances rather than friends, and his statements in sworn affidavits, all claiming that the Lexus was seized at 5:30 and he arrived in Dighton at 4:30, were typos. Thus, Proctor, Buchanan, and Tully, acting under the color of law, violated Miss Reed's Fourth Amendment rights against unreasonable searches and seizures. As proximate results of this misconduct, Miss Reed was wrongfully persecuted for Mr. Okeefe's death and made to defend herself in 2 trials in the Superior Court for Norfolk County, resulting in the loss of employment, reputational damages, and millions of dollars of legal expenses, as well as serious emotional and physical distress and injury. In addition to an award of damages for these harms, Miss Reed is entitled to her attorney's fees under blah, 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 cost, interest, and punitive damages. Count 2. Superior liability against Buchanan and Tully in their individual capacities. The preceding paragraphs are incorporated herein by reference. A supervisor is liable under USC blah, blah, blah when the supervisor supervises, trains, or hires a subordinate with deliberate indifference towards the possibility that the subordinate's deficient performance will result in deprivation of an individual's constitutional rights. Buchanan and Tully knew or should have known that there was a grave risk that Proctor would fail to investigate the Alberts with whom he had a close personal relationship with, which he had disclosed. They also knew or should have known that there was a grave risk Proctor would wrongfully seek to have Miss Reed charged, given and manifest bias evidenced in his text messages, which were sent to Buchanan amongst others. Buchanan and Tully could have taken easily available steps to avoid a constitutionally deficient, malicious prosecution of Miss Reed. These measures include, but are not limited to, replacing Proctor with an unbiased investigator that had no personal relationship with anyone involved in Mr. Okeefe's death. 2, safeguarding crime scene and physical evidence, including Mr. Okeefe's clothing and 47 pieces of taillight material, to prevent anyone from planting, manufacturing, or manipulating evidence. 3, initiating timely searches at the Alberts' home and quickly seizing the cell phones and other forms of electronic evidence in the possession of the Alberts, the McCabe's, and Higgins, which would have prevented their later manipulation and destruction. Oh, I'm almost done. Yay. By not taking any of those measures, Buchanan and Tully permitted Proctor and Tully permitted Buchanan to violate Miss Reed's Fourth Amendment rights against unreasonable searches and seizures, and thus themselves violated Miss Reed's Fourth Amendment rights. In these ways and others, Buchanan's conduct constituted condemnation of or acquiescence to Proctor's behavior and gross negligence amounting to deliberate indifference. In these ways and others, Tully's conduct constitute condemnation of or acquiescence of Buchanan's and Proctor's behavior and or negligence amounting deliberate indifference. Okay, let me see what's going on over here. I'm almost done. Okay, nobody's typing. Cool. Make sure you hit the like, share the live if you see this later. Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm almost done. Okay, as approximate result of their breaches, Miss Reed was wrongfully persecuted for Mr. Okeefe's death, resulting in loss of employment, reputational damages, and millions of dollars of legal expenses, as well as a serious emotional and physical distress and injury. In addition to an award of damages for these harms, Miss Reed is entitled to attorney's fees, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Count 3. Conspiracy to deprive Miss Reed of her Fourth Amendment rights against Proctor, Buchanan, Tully, the Alberts, the McCabe's, and Higgins. The preceding paragraphs are incorporated herein by reference. Proctor, Buchanan, Tully, the Alberts, the McCabe's, and Higgins shared a common design and acted in concert to frame Miss Reed for Mr. Okeefe's death. As part of their concerted efforts, and among their many other misrepresentations, the Alberts, McCabe's, and Higgins agreed with each other to tell investigators that Mr. Okeefe never entered the house, that they did not see Mr. Okeefe in the house that night, and that Miss Reed made inculpatory statements on the morning of January 29th. When they made these statements, the House defendants did so only because they were aware that Proctor, Buchanan, and Tully would also act similarly by solely investigating Miss Reed. Proctor, Buchanan, and Tully knew or should have known that the statements made to them by the House defendants were false, and the obvious and easily obtainable evidence existed, demonstrating Mr. Okeefe went into the house where he was involved in a physical altercation during which he was beat up, fell back, gashing his head, and attacked by a dog. Instead, because of their close personal and professional ties to the House defendants, Proctor, Buchanan, and Tully agreed with each other to use the House defendants' misrepresentations as the predicate for the implicit direction to conduct and investigate that solely targeted Miss Reed to the exclusion of everyone else and anyone else. In furtherance of this plan, among other unlawful conduct, Proctor, Buchanan, and Tully agreed to continue to handle an investigation even though they had personal relationships with suspects in the murder, which led to unlawful favorable treatment of potential suspects, to continue to handle and investigate even though they had biases against investigating the House defendants because of the House defendants' ties to law enforcement, to continue to handle and investigate even though they had exhibited an extreme and personal negative bias towards Karen Read, to violate rules, policies, and procedures in all aspects of an investigation, to plant, manufacture, and manipulate evidence, falsify documents, and commit pure perjury, to not secure evidence and the crime scene, to not investigate and obtain available evidence or timely and appropriately interview suspects, and to not investigate the Alberts, McCabe's, or Higgins. The McCabe's and Alberts coordinated their efforts through text messages, through phone calls and conversations. Higgins and Brian Albert coordinated their efforts through telephone calls and texts on their phones, which were later destroyed or discarded. Finally, Proctor, Buchanan, and Tully coordinated with the Alberts, McCabe's through Proctor's sister, Courtney, who communicated frequently with Julie Albert. Acting pursuant to the plan, Proctor and Buchanan interviewed the McCabe's and Brian Albert in a cursory manner, and all at the same location midday on January 29th, and Nicole Albert on February 3rd. Proctor and Buchanan only interviewed Higgins once at his attorney's home and did not secure or search his phone for communications between him, the Alberts, and the McCabe's. Proctor and Buchanan did not search the Alberts' phones or homes where there was likely evidence of Mr. Okeefe's murder. Brian Albert and Brian Higgins destroyed or discarded their phones, destroying evidence of the murder and cover-up. As a result of the conspiracy between them and among them, Proctor, Buchanan, and Tully never investigated the House defendants, and instead Miss Reed was wrongfully arrested and prosecuted in violation of her Fourth Amendment rights. Proctor, Buchanan, Tully, and the House defendants acted in unison and had particular power of coercion over Miss Reed because Proctor, Buchanan, and Tully were the state police. Okay, Miss Reed's wrongful indictment, arrest, and prosecution by destroying or discarding their phone. The House defendants therefore interfered and attempted to interfere with Miss Reed's rights under the Fourth Amendment of the United States Constitution and Article 14 of the Massachusetts Declaration of Rights. Miss Reed's wrongful indictment, arrest, and prosecution were intrinsically coercive under Massachusetts law. Moreover, the House defendants and Proctor, Buchanan's, and Tully conduct amount to threats, intimidation, and coercion designed to force Miss Reed to give up her defense and plead guilty to a crime she did not commit. As a proximate result of defendants' actions, Miss Reed was wrongfully persecuted for Mr. Okeefe's death, resulting in loss, employment, reputational damages, and millions of dollars of legal expenses, as well as serious and emotional distress and injury. In addition to an award of damages, these harms Miss Reed's entitled to cost, interest, and attorney's fees. Count 5. Common law, malicious prosecution against Proctor, all of them. The preceding paragraphs are incorporated herein by reference. By manufacturing and planning evidence, not securing the crime scene, not searching the Alberts' home or the Alberts and Higgins phones, and ignoring exculpatory evidence such as Mr. Okeefe's dog bite injuries and lack of injuries consistent of vehicle strike, Proctor, Buchanan, and Tully caused Miss Reed's indictment, arrest, and prosecution. Miss Reed's indictment, arrest, and prosecution occurred with probable cause because they were based on false, manufactured, manipulated, and planted evidence, and because Proctor, Buchanan, and Tully ignored exculpatory evidence and allowed potentially exculpatory evidence to be destroyed. Okay. These criminal proceedings were instituted with malice, as evidenced by Proctor's, Buchanan's, and Tully's knowledge that it was based on false evidence, Proctor's, Buchanan's, and Tully's bias and ill will towards Miss Reed, and for the improper purpose to protect Proctor's friends, acquaintances at the Alberts. The criminal proceedings terminated in Miss Reed's favor when she was acquitted of murder, manslaughter, and leaving the scene of an accident with the death by falsely representing that Mr. Okeefe never entered the Albert house, and by relocating his body to a location on the front lawn on the Albert property when Jennifer McCabe would claim Miss Reed dropped off Mr. Okeefe, Brian and Nicole Albert, and the McCabes and Higgins caused Miss Reed's wrongful indictment, arrest, and prosecution. Brian Alberts and Brian Higgins also caused Miss Reed's wrongful indictment, arrest, and prosecution by destroying and discarding their phones, eliminating exculpatory evidence. As a proximate result of the defendant's actions, Miss Reed was wrongfully persecuted for Mr. Okeefe's death, resulting in loss of employment, reputational damages, and millions of dollars legal expenses, as well as serious emotional distress and injury. Count 6. Intentional infliction of emotional distress. The preceding paragraphs are incorporated herein by reference. By manufacturing and planning evidence, not securing the crime scene, not searching the Alberts' home or the Alberts and Higgins phones, and ignoring exculpatory evidence such as Mr. Okeefe's dog bite injuries and lack of injuries consistent with the vehicle strike, Proctor, Buchanan, and Tully caused Miss Reed's indictment, arrest, and prosecution. By falsely representing that Mr. Reed never entered, or Mr. Okeefe never entered the Albert house, and relocating the body on the location of the Albert home, where Jennifer McCabe claimed Miss Reed dropped Mr. Okeefe, the Alberts, the McCabes, and Miss Reed's wrongful indictment, arrest, and prosecution of Miss Reed. Brian Albert and Brian Higgins also caused Miss Reed wrongful indictment, arrest, and prosecution by destroying and discarding their phones, eliminating exculpatory evidence. The defendants knew or should have known their conduct would cause Miss Reed emotional distress, since it would lead to her prosecution for murder and other crimes. And the conduct did cause and is causing Miss Reed severe emotional and physical distress. The defendant's conduct perverted the system, allowed Mr. Okeefe's true killer to escape liability, and threatened to imprison Miss Reed. It is the type of behavior that threatens civilized society and is therefore extreme and outrageous. As a proximate result of defendant's actions, Miss Reed suffered serious emotional and physical distress and injury. Count 7. Oh, am I almost done? Civil conspiracy. The preceding paragraphs are incorporated herein by reference. Proctor, Buchanan, Tully, the Alberts, the McCabe's, and Higgins shared a common design and acted in concert to frame Miss Reed for Mr. Okeefe's death. As part of their concerted efforts and amongst their many other misrepresentations, the Alberts, McCabe's, and Higgins agreed with each other to tell investigators that Mr. Okeefe never entered the house, that they did not see Mr. Okeefe in the house that night, and Miss Reed made inculpatory statements on the morning of January 29th. When they made these statements, the House defendants did so only because they were aware Proctor, Buchanan, and Tully would also act similarly by solely investigating Miss Reed. Proctor, Buchanan, and Tully knew or should have known that these statements made to them by the House defendants were false, and that the obvious and easily obtainable evidence existed demonstrating Mr. Okeefe went into the house where he was involved in a physical altercation during which he was beaten up, fell back, gashing his head, and attacked by a dog. Instead, because of their close personal and professional ties to the House defendants, Proctor, Buchanan, and Tully agreed with each other to use the House defendants' misrepresentations as the predicate for the implicit direction to conduct an investigation that solely targeted Miss Reed to the exclusion of everyone and anyone else. In furtherance of the conspiracy, Proctor, Tully, and Buchanan agreed to fabricate, plant, manipulate evidence purporting to show that Miss Reed vehicle hit Mr. Okeefe pursuant to their plan. Proctor, Buchanan, and Tully carried out multiple overt acts, including damaging the taillight of Miss Reed's vehicle while it was in the town of Canton Sallyport, not securing the crime scene, and depositing taillight pieces on January 29th prior to the MSP CERT team's arrival on site. In addition, Proctor deposited some of the broken taillight pieces on Mr. Okeefe's clothing while the clothing was in his unprotected custody. Proctor deposited also glass alleged to have been from cocktail glass on the bumper of Miss Reed's SUV sometime prior to the vehicle's processing by the MSPCL on February 1st. Another part of the conspiracy was to take the coordinated steps to ignore and destroy potentially exculpatory evidence that pointed to other suspects like the Alberts and Higgins. The McCabe's, the Alberts, and Higgins coordinated through text messages, phone calls, and on information and belief conversations. Higgins and Brian Albert coordinated through telephone calls and on information and belief texts on their phones, which were later destroyed and discarded. Finally, Proctor coordinated with Alberts and McCabe's through his sister, Courtney, who spoke frequently with Julie Albert. Acting pursuant to the plan, Proctor Buchanan interviewed the McCabe's and Bryant in cursory manner the morning of January 29th and Nicole Albert on February 3rd. All told the same false story. Mr. Okeefe never entered the Albert house. Proctor Buchanan and Tully also only interviewed Higgins once with his attorney at his attorney's home and did not secure or search Higgins' phones or search for communications between him, Alberts, and the McCabe's. Pursuant to the coordinated plan, Proctor Buchanan and Tully also did not search the Alberts' phone or home where there were likely evidence of Mr. Okeefe's murder and cover-up. Following Mr. Okeefe's death, among other acts, the McCabe's and Alberts agreed to make it look like Mr. Okeefe died due to exposure after being hit by Miss Reed's car. As part of the common plan, Brian Albert and Higgins, both law enforcement officers familiar with investigations, communicated at 2:22 on January 29th after Higgins left the house shortly thereafter. As part of the plan, Jennifer McCabe deleted a Google search at 2:27 a.m. on January 29th for how long it takes a person to die in the cold. One or more of them relocated Mr. Okeefe's body and deposited it in the front yard of the Alberts house, where Jennifer McCabe claimed Miss Reed had dropped Mr. Okeefe off earlier. The McCabe's and Alberts then coordinated what they would say to the police, and all the falsely telling investigators that Mr. Okeefe never entered the house. Proctor Buchanan, Tully, and the house dependents acted in unison and had a peculiar power of coercion over Miss Reed because Proctor Buchanan and Tully were the state police employees investigating Mr. Okeefe's murder, and house defendants were able to direct the investigation solely towards Miss Reed because their personal and professional ties. Or connections to Proctor Buchanan and Tully, and their superior knowledge of police and criminal investigations as a result of their own work and connection to law enforcement. Proctors Buchanan's, Tully's, and the House defendants' conduct described herein were unlawful and torturous. Amongst other things, they constitute an intentional infliction of emotional distress, negligence, common law, malicious prosecution, and violations of Miss Reed's rights pursuant to the United States Constitution and the Massachusetts Declarations of Rights. As a proximate result of defendants' actions, Miss Reed was wrongfully prosecuted for Mr. Okeefe's death, resulting in loss of employment, reputational damages, $1 million of legal fees, as well as serious and emotional and physical distress and injury. Jury demand Miss Reed respects requests a jury trial on all matters so triable. Prayer for relief. Wherefore, Miss Reed respectfully requests that the court grant her the following relief. Enter judgment in her favor and against each relevant defendant on each count of this complaint. Award her damages in the amount to be calculated at trial, along with pre- and post-judgment interest, costs, and expenses. Award her reasonable attorney's fees incurred in connection with this litigation and any other applicable statute or law. Grant her such other relief as the court deems equitable and just. And then it's signed by her attorneys. Yay, I finished it. That was long. Anyways, I didn't think I was going to take this long, but I guess I was. Anywho. All right. everybody, I'm gonna get out of here. But yeah, she's suing everybody, and they may be suing her back for defamation of character and all that great stuff. But anyway, so I'll be here Friday. Yes, I know I can't read. Reading is fundamental. I don't like reading out loud. But anyways, yeah, so I'm gonna cover that on Friday because this is the case that keeps on giving. Corruption at its finest. But I appreciate everybody that came by, hit the like, shared the live, all that great stuff. Please, 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 please think about subscribing to me. Please make sure you hit the bell. You know, maybe hype me up afterwards. I would greatly appreciate it. I went 25 minutes over. So I can't do the little shorts. But anyways, all right. I greatly appreciate ya. Everybody, let the ones you love and care about know that you love and care about them because tomorrow's not promised. And stay blessed. Bye. Bye, bro.
Turn me up, AV.